Hello and welcome back to the StoreHero podcast. This morning we're joined by Nathan Perdriau, the co-founder and head of paid media at Blue Sense Media. Nathan, good morning.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
With an accent like that and a difference between morning and afternoon, where are you based?
Melbourne, Australia.
Melbourne, Australia. So it's coming into our summer here, so you guys are getting the opposite end of the spectrum, I'd imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, it's getting cold as of the last few weeks. It's trench coat weather.
I have no sympathy for you. We've got plenty of rain here in Ireland for the last couple of months, so I'm very much looking forward to a bit of sunshine for the few days we tend to get it.
I'd imagine so.
I suppose, just Nathan, it'd be interesting to just get a bit of an intro from yourself, who you are, what you're up to, what are you working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Head of paid media and co-founder at Blue Sense Digital, an agency based out of Melbourne, Australia. Started 3 years ago, grown to a team of 24 to 25 now. We started off specializing in Facebook and Google ads. And the reason for that was prior to the start of the agency, I was running e-com stores myself. I was running e-com stores for about 2 years and spent well over $250,000 of my own ad spend. And so when you're spending your own money, you become very, very careful with how you allocate those funds. Because if you go and spend $100 on ads, it's not someone else's money, it's your own. And if there's not a return, you're just losing money on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I was doing for the first 6 to 8 months. I was just spending and losing money and paying down lessons. But eventually I started getting quite good at Google and Facebook ads in particular, and started holding stock in the US in some 3PLs, but then eventually moved into a position where I was just chasing trends. That was what I got really good at, is identifying the landscape and going, okay, what product's going to sell well right now, chasing that trend, doing well for 3 to 4 months, but then needing to find another product. And so that led me into wanting to get out of chasing trends and go into something more sustainable. So I partnered with co-founder Sebastian. We started Blue Sense. And then over the course of the last 3 years, the service has really evolved into more of a consulting and bridging finance, ops, and marketing rather than a digital marketing agency. So I almost regret that we called it Blue Sense Digital, because now we have that digital attached to the name, but it is what it is.
Just to pause there. Okay, you were chasing trends. You ran a few stores. Are we talking teeth whitening strips, fidget spinners? What kind of trends were you chasing?
Quite a few. I'll give you an example of two, because there was probably like 10 to 20 over the time period. One of them was outdoor patio heaters. So when COVID hit, I was quick to identify that restaurants in the US could continue to operate, but only if they had people outside. And so all of the cold states needed outdoor patio heaters. People aren't going to sit at a restaurant outside unless it's warm. And so outdoor patio heaters pretty much went into a shortage straight away in the US. And so I managed to source some stock locally, sold it at $10 to $20 CPAs, and a patio heater sells for about 1.1 thousand. And so that's a ridiculous return on ad spend. And then I started looking to see how I could import directly into the country. I managed to import 400 to 500 and quickly sell through them. Another one was kids' telescopes. Identified
just to pause there. So
yeah.
You're saying a $10 to $20 CPA on $1,000 item, so it's like a 50 to 100 ROAS or MER.
Yeah, correct.
Same returns as today, I would imagine, for all Blue Sense clients.
Yeah, of course, always.
The glory days.
And then, another one with similar unit economics would be telescopes. So around Christmas, and anyone can copy this right now, like this still works, which is around Christmas, everyone buys their kids $100 to $150 telescopes. It's a niche that booms around that period. And so I got my hands on a few thousand telescopes in stock and sold through them in like a 3-week period in late November, early December, because everyone's just buying for their kids. And once again, CPAs are $4 to $10 because there's such high demand and there's limited supply, I believe, at the time. And so once again, these aren't like long sustainable brands that are building equity. These are just quick opportunities that I jump in I got very good at allocating funds through the right campaigns and building the campaigns correctly. And that's what it really turned into, was just leveraging these short-term opportunities.
Nice. Very interesting. And I suppose, yeah, a couple of different ones. And what was, out of all the trends that you caught, was there any that you kind of touched on? These were just trends; they weren't building brand equity or anything like that. Was there any of the businesses that you started that you might have thought there could be an opportunity to build a brand with one of these, or did you just see them all for what they were, just quick trends to kind of jump on top of?
I think at the time I didn't have the skill set required to turn what was essentially quick opportunities into long-term brands. It was in my mind, absolutely, and I was thinking about how could I do a custom order with a certain MOQ for these telescopes and rebrand and become a brand. But I don't think I had enough conviction in myself, because when you do start a brand, it suddenly becomes pretty capital intensive, and you start being positioned in a way where you might not be free cash flowing that aggressively for a 3 to 6 month period. And that wasn't the position that I wanted to be in. I was very much so about, I'm good at chasing trends. I know how to do it. Let me just keep doing this and keep spitting out cash flow, rather than buckling down, stopping, and really focusing on one thing. In hindsight now, these days, I would absolutely buckle down, start a brand. And it's something we're looking to do. We're looking to make acquisitions on brands that we work with, but not to go back into the same mindset of quick opportunities.
It's difficult. I mean, there's running an e-com business is obviously incredibly difficult. It's not just a case of cobbling together a Shopify store over a day or two and then pumping up Facebook ads in behind it. That can work, but you need to run a real business behind it, and there's so much thought that goes into every aspect of the business that I think often a lot of particularly newer D2C brand owners mightn't be fully cognizant of when they kind of first of all set up that Shopify store for the very first time. It's a lot of work to kind of get it right, and there's so many kind of core components to it that I just don't think a lot of people are fully aware of when they kind of initially start out on their journey.
Yeah, people have no idea how hard it actually is to build a profitable e-com store, a profitable business, full stop. The amount of time you have to invest, and then the amount of skill acquisition you need to get is this is the one thing that I don't like about the education space, particularly with coaches and mentors and things like this, is that they try to pull people in saying it's very, very easy, and it's not. And then there's this common line, which is, if you want time freedom, then start a business and work on your own hours. And it's like, no, start a business and work all hours. That's how that works. So yeah, I agree. There's so many different components to ecom, and you have to learn them all. Right now, especially in 2024, where everything's squeezing too, and there isn't a lot of free disposable income sitting around at the moment. And so you have to really have everything dialed in. You need to understand pricing. You need to understand unit economics. You need to understand how to source products at a COGS with an appropriate maintained markup that's going to factor in your CAC. And then it's like, okay, how do you even know what a good CAC is on paid advertising? How do you know what's realistic? Do you know how to forecast? Do you know how to inventory manage? You want to make sure that you're not getting all your free cash flow mixed up in inventory, because then you can't scale and you completely mess up your cash conversion cycle. And it's like you start saying these things, and 90% of people that start an e-com brand have no idea what any of that even is. Yeah. But I guess that's the lessons that you have to pay down at the start. And that's the lessons majority of people are paying down now, is they don't know these things, but they're starting anyway. And so it's just a very expensive process.
Why do they not know? Like, I run into this with a lot of different people. Why have we got to a position where e-com is not new? Understanding P&Ls, unit economics for most businesses is not new. Why do you think e-com specifically have got to a point where we're well into Shopify is nearly around 20 years at this point? Why is this kind of conversation around finances with e-com and understanding that the true unit economics of your marketing, I think it really in the last 2-3 years it's really coming to the fore, like for the masses, I suppose. Obviously the best brands would have always had lock and key and understanding exactly the core components of this, but I really think it's really only become mainstream in the last probably year and a half. Eager to kind of hear your thoughts on why maybe the industry is only starting to make these changes or coming around to this way of thinking relatively recently.
I think there's two. Number one is you could really get away with sloppy unit economics and marketing 3 to 4 years ago, particularly 5 to 6 years ago, when it was really, really cheap to drive traffic to site. And so customer acquisition costs weren't really an issue. And then the second factor there is that majority, and correct me if I'm wrong if you disagree with this, but I would say that majority of people that start an e-com brand, a D2C e-com brand, are product-orientated people. They're not there because they have a financial background. And in fact, they probably are very, very, they don't want to go anywhere near finances. The second you start mentioning unit economics and maintain markup, it's, I don't know. I want to focus on the product and I want to sell it. And that's it. And so it's not a very sexy part of e-com, and it's not something people really want to go into the trenches of and educate themselves on, particularly because, and I challenge you right now, go to YouTube and type in unit economics e-commerce. The videos are going to be very, very boring. Like it's not fun content to watch, and it's just the hard work that needs to be done now. And I think that's why there is this big shift and people are orientating their content towards it, because it's much more difficult to start a brand and just run some ads and make money.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. I think it's probably a combination of two things that made it really easy. And, you could allow brands to really not focus on and kind of understand everything you've just kind of alluded to there. Shopify really lowered the bar for what it took to get a product online. And you didn't have to be a developer. You could develop that kind of side hustle in your kitchen, and all of a sudden you could be online in a matter of hours if you actually just put your mind to it and kind of cobble together a Shopify store. It's genuinely not that difficult. You could start accepting payments. Then Facebook and Google came along, and you could advertise really cheaply. You didn't need to be a genius marketer. So you have these two kind of core components of not needing to be technically brilliant to get a product online and be able to sell it. And then the ad arbitrage from Facebook and Google was so good for so long that you could then get that product online and you could market it and get a lot of people onto your website to buy it with not a lot of competition around you. And I think, as you kind of mentioned, the pieces we're kind of touching on here was the boring, unsexy side of the business. And it's not every, if you're a product oriented person, it's not what's going to excite you to get up in the morning. So it probably was left on the back burner for some time. But as you kind of alluded to there, as the CAC, particularly in the last 18 months to 2 years, has significantly increased. I think now more than ever, it's just like it's incredibly important for anyone to kind of really get a firm handle on all of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going a little bit deeper into the actual P&L, after the back end of COVID, a lot of brands did really well, and they grew just off the back of the COVID boom and the disposable income, plus everyone being at home and buying online. And as a consequence, because majority of these brands either weren't fantastic financial operators, or they just thought COVID would go forever, which is also somewhat a reasonable assumption, right?
Yeah.
This is the boom of e-com. E-com's now growing at 30, 40, 50% per year. It's going to continue, and COVID's going to cause that trend, because no one could really see the end of what COVID was going to turn into. As a consequence, everyone upped their operating expenses like crazy. And so OPEX went up 2-3x for some of these brands, 4x if they were factoring in future growth. And then there's been this pullback of 30 to 40% in top line rev for a lot of brands post the COVID boom. And what ends up happening is P&L just squeezes to zero on net negative cash flowing. And the issue with OPEX is, particularly in e-com brands, it's tough to get rid of. It's funny because you can go to an e-com brand, you can say, oh, your issue's OPEX, get rid of it. And it's like, so you want me to fire 4 people? Probably not. You want me to downsize my warehouse that I have lease terms on? Probably not. And so you end up in a very difficult situation if you've overinflated your OPEX and now your issue is you have to cut back. And that all started from financial ops and not having a good understanding of keeping your OPEX lean while you're growing, rather than doing this heavy reinvesting, factoring in ridiculous growth targets that maybe you were gearing towards an exit, maybe you weren't, but it's a dangerous way to do business.
100%. And it's often, it's often the last thing people look at. They're think about top line revenue metrics. They think about all of their ad metrics, and profit is often an afterthought. And there's no real clear consideration in terms of what needs to happen in order for us to make a profit. Whereas, I think that's the best way to operate a D2C brand is like, okay, what profit are we looking for, and almost work backwards from that. If we're to achieve that much profit, how much sales do we need? What's our MER? What's our CAC? What's our contribution margin? Need to be to cover that operating expenses on a monthly basis as we kind of forecast out the year. But yeah, no, that makes so much sense. So, okay, we're post telescopes, we're post patio heaters. When did you guys establish Blue Sense Media?
3 years ago and 2 months, I believe. So, what would that take us back to? 2021.
Nice, and you've scaled the team to 25 people in that space of time.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Fast growth.
Yeah, it's been a journey. It's funny because I think I put a LinkedIn post out about this maybe 6 months ago, which was the first 6 months after the inception of the company, we had 0 clients. And then in the next 6 months, we had maybe 15. And then the next 6, it was 40. And then the next 6, it was 65 or 70. So you end up seeing in most people's growth, this bell curve on the end, but the start is always brutal. So we've sort of felt the fast growth in the last year or so, but it definitely didn't feel fast in the early days.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. Fair play for sticking at it though, because 6 months in with no clients, a lot of people would have just thrown the towel in at that point. But obviously, I think it's so important for somebody to run an agency and obviously be responsible for arguably the most important line of the entire P&L, which is the marketing budget. To have come from a background where you have ran your own stores and your own brands, and you have, as you kind of said, you spent your own money on these things. You understand the pains and the opportunities that a brand owner would have. And I think it's difficult to relate to that unless you've never spent your own money on it. And you kind of have been in the shoes of the people that you're kind of working on behalf of a lot of the time. So I just think that's so important. You kind of mentioned that, I suppose, that the shift a little bit from, traditional paid media agency to more of a e-com consultancy. You might just speak to that a little bit, just so we kind of understand, I suppose, the difference in what you guys are trying to move a little bit more towards.
For sure. About a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, what we ended up finding with majority of clients is that we, quite frankly, couldn't convince them to increase ad spend. We didn't have compelling enough reasons, and they weren't seeing incredible rates of top-line growth. And the really basic fundamental understanding that we had at the time was, well, how can top-line revenue grow if ad spend isn't going to grow? How are you acquiring new customers? How is that going to increase? And so we started going into this rabbit hole of, okay, how do we create a convincing argument for clients to increase ad spend for their best intentions in mind? And at the time, we were only working on flat retainers. So there was no incentive for us to increase ad spend. We weren't taking a percentage. We weren't like, yeah, we need to push ad spend through the roof. We just wanted to get good case studies. So we're like, how can we increase ad spend? And so it came down to getting unit economics off brands, understanding gross margins, going all the way down to either contribution profit or to net profit, and going, hey, here's our argument. If you increase ad spend by $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, and we maintain a similar ROAS, or let's actually bring in an incremental ROAS dip, you will make this much more money. And then clients immediately see it on paper and they go, oh, okay, seems stupid not to. And then they started increasing ad spend, and we started getting really, really good case studies across the board. And that was sort of the first step into the finance space, which, funny enough, me and the co-founder both have finance degrees. That's our background is in finance. Oh. Mine's in engineering as well. And so we have all the knowledge in the space. We've just never really applied it. And so we went, okay, let's start walking down that path. And then pretty quickly after, and I'm sure you would understand this very, very clearly, we realized that we were scaling ad spend. We were hitting the numbers that we put in place. And then the client would come back and say, hey, last quarter we lost money. And we'd be looking at them on the call going, but that's not possible because you gave us this Excel sheet and we hit these numbers. And they're going, no, we lost money. And we're going, okay, is your gross margin number wrong? And then they said, no, we mark up by 2x. So our gross margin's 50%. And then we're going, okay, but what about shipping and fulfillment? What about getting the product into the countries that the landed costs? What about this, that, the other, all these variable costs, 3PL fees, all of it comes into consideration. And then they go, oh, we didn't think that would matter. We go, okay, well, what's your new gross? Oh, it's 25%. Oh, okay. Very different situation. We've just scaled losses, and not with the intention of doing it. We were just given false data. And so that sort of led into the second evolution, or the second step of the agency, going down the finance route, which was, we can't rely on clients to tell us their numbers. We can't. We need to actually do the due diligence for them. And we need to build that into the service and get an understanding for what their numbers actually are, and have lines of questioning and know how to get to the bottom. And then that started to turn into OPEX as well. It was like we would ask for OPEX, and clients would either give us way overinflated OPEX because they're including all their write-offs, all their personal write-offs. They've got their car expenses in there. They've got everything. And they're like, we're not making money. And we're like, yeah, because your whole personal life is on the business. Of course you're not making money. Or vice versa. They wouldn't put all their OPEX expenses in, and they'd still be in a bad position. And so we really have now walked all the way into a position where we're just consulting across finances and operations. And we're looking at all aspects of the business and consulting on, particularly the framework that we use internally is the cash conversion cycle. So at the end of the day, how quickly a brand can grow is a function of how short they can make their cash conversion cycle, because you're going, and this is only for bootstrap brands. If you have funding, then it's different. But most D2C brands are bootstrapped.
99% of brands don't have funding, so I think it's so important.
Yeah. And so how quick you can grow is just a function of how quickly can you spit out free cash flow and then reinvest that into inventory that then turns into free cash flow almost immediately. And so that gets broken down into CAC, returning customer rates, 30-day sell-through rates, OPEX, maintained markup. And so you can start to pull out all of these different levers that you can pull on, and you can start to zoom in on a couple levers and go, okay, if we can improve your markup and we can improve your OPEX, you can cash flow into the future at this rate compared to this rate. You're going to be in a much better position. We can actually track what your bank account's going to look like. And that's going to be how you're going to scale at 2x the growth rate rather than the current trajectory that you're on. So I found that to be a really effective model using internally.
So are you guys getting into Xero and QuickBooks then with all of your clients, as well as the Facebook ad accounts?
We're getting P&L exports, so
okay.
we don't want to get into Xero and QuickBooks. We're like, we can. We've got Xero access to a few clients. They'll just give it to us and go do the export yourself. But I think it will. I think it will get to that stage eventually, because even when we do a due diligence off of exports, how is the bookkeeper reconciling the transactions? And you'd be surprised, a lot of them don't reconcile them correctly. In fact, I've looked at client zeros where the bookkeeper is not the bookkeeper themselves, the business owner is reconciling COGS as not an asset. They're expensing it. And so the P&L just looks like this on a month-on-month basis.
Yeah, I've seen some horror stories myself, to be honest with you, in this. It's wild. But I think the avenue you're kind of going down is, personally, I think it's going to be how agencies are going to all operate. Maybe not to the depths that you guys are going, but I think the traditional agency who has just reported to their clients on ROAS and can't look at, cash conversion cycles, can't talk about what your profitability is going to look like. Those agencies, I think, are all going to die in the next 5 years. I think, over the last couple, if you go back 5 years, the skill of running a Facebook ad was really being able to get into the ad account and actually target as specifically as possible. But now, like, Meta are telling you to go as broad as possible. And like, where's the skill that the agency of 5 years' time is going to be really delivering to the client? And I think it's going to be in really understanding all the kind of key points you've touched on there: the gross margins, the COGS, mapping to contribution margins, the CAC, all the way down to profit first. But I think unless the agency is trained and fully understanding of the kind of financial implications of their daily actions within the client's ad accounts, it's all not really going to work. So I just think there's a big shift coming in how a lot of paid agencies are going to be working on behalf of their clients. I think it's probably going to morph into, obviously, trying to optimize creatives where possible, but it's going to be more about strategic budget allocation within the accounts and having that all kind of work towards one consolidated plan, as opposed to just what I think is this disjointed thinking where we just constantly look at ROAS and we just don't really understand. You kind of touched on it there, like can we double spend and take into account the incremental dip in ROAS? And is that still right for me? Because I'm sure you guys see this as well, but a lot of clients come to us as well and say, look, I'm not spending past a 3 mer because that's my number. And when you kind of dig into the why, it's kind of like finger in the air stuff. We haven't really thought through why we have that number. It's just somebody decided that was a good number, and that's what we're going to run on. But that necessarily isn't always the best thing for the client. And I just think there's a huge shift coming to how the agency space is going to be working with D2C brands, because I think the lack of financial knowledge from a lot of agencies has actually inhibited a lot of brands' growth. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, and probably at this current kind of time as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of strings to pull on there, but I agree. I agree a lot. Even just going back to the ROAS example, and I feel like I'm annoying people at this stage because all I do is say ROAS is bad, MER is good, blah blah blah. But when we were doing those mapping on Excels back in the day, is we were saying, hey, 2x your ad spend. We'll model in this kind of return on ad spend. We are basing this on historical data. Seems quite reasonable. We're never going to give ridiculous expectations. We're always going to try to anchor down and then overachieve. But the ROAS numbers were not a direct representation of actual back-end revenue. And I think this is where this new opportunity of skill is kind of opening in the media buying space, which is that anyone that was running Facebook ads back in 2019, 2020, really 2016 as well, was like, there was just a bunch of hacks. It was, you run 20 ad sets at $1 a day and you somehow hack the algorithm into getting you the best CPAs. And there was all kinds of wacky stuff. And media buying was an entire vertical in itself of, can you find someone that's running 100 tests at once and figuring out what's working right now and then run it in your account. And that's slowly diluted over the course of the last 2 years. And now it's really being incredibly strategical and understanding of the platforms and understanding how they operate at a base level. And so you can say, run an Advantage Plus campaign, throw a bunch of creatives in, let it go. But if you don't understand the intent of why Facebook is rolling out Advantage Plus, if you don't understand who Advantage Plus is actually serving to, then you're probably not a good media buyer and you don't understand what you're doing or how you're structuring anything. And I'll give you an example. What is the primary intent of Google and Facebook? It is to maximize their own revenue and therefore maximize ad spend of individual advertisers or gain more advertisers on the platform. It's one of the two. And so how do they do that? How do they incentivize a D2C brand, any brand really, to spend more? It's to attribute as much revenue as possible to the platform. Because if they can say that you're getting a 10 ROAS and $100,000 out of your $150,000 is from Facebook, well, guess what? You're going to keep spending on Facebook if you think they're 66% of your business, and you're probably going to spend more. It doesn't take a strong financial operator to make the math and go, all the revenue's Facebook, increase that, and then you go and increase it, and your revenue doesn't change. You go, what's going on? And it's because Facebook and Advantage Plus is heavily remarketing any visitor or customer that's on site and then claiming the conversion through one-day view attribution. And so if a user views an ad and then buys through an email, through whatever, didn't have to interact with the ad, Facebook goes, claims it, attributes. Same thing that PMax does. It'll just serve across display and then just claim attributions. It'll do it across YouTube view-throughs. And so having an understanding of that, understanding how the campaigns work, I feel like it's a new vertical that's starting to open up, which is more of an omni-channel approach, which is I understand fundamentally how these platforms work, what their incentives are. And so I need to build in structures, KPIs, reporting that takes that into consideration. I know that Advantage Plus is going to over attribute. So what can I do to get visibility over that and then make a more educated decision? How can I keep my variables constant? How can I refer to MER, top line revenue? This goes on.
Yeah, really, really interesting points. So would you typically only, like you're kind of saying, the attribution issues through the one-day click piece with Advantage Plus, is MER your dominant KPI for gauging advertising, success, I suppose, within an ad account, or are you still looking at ROAS, we'll say, on an individual campaign level?
We still look at ROAS at an individual campaign level because it's going to give you insights as to if you're split testing creative or if you're split testing different sales channels on Google, for example. But in terms of MER. I like MER and CAC as well. So you can look at BCAC, which is blended CAC across all ad spend. I like them for two reasons. Number one is they're the source of truth. This is your actual cash in, cash out. But number two is that it directly relates to the P&L and forecasting, which is if we're hitting a 5 MER, we are guaranteed profitable because we know all the other numbers in our business will be this, therefore increase ad spend. Whereas if we're looking at in-platform ROAS, we can get into a position where it's like, okay, if in-platform ROAS is a 10 scale spend, and then it's a 10, and the client's like, no, let's not scale spend, we don't have cash. It's like, well, is it a KPI then? What's the point in a KPI if you don't take action once you hit it? And so these metrics that take into consideration actual revenue and actual sales figures, it gives us a much better ability to orientate towards projections and growth rather than just having these imaginary KPIs that don't really mean anything once you hit them.
So a brand owner comes to you and says, look, I don't really want to look at MER because it takes into account all my SEO traffic that's coming onto the website, it takes into account all my emails. That's a conversation I'm sure you probably run into quite a lot. I know I do. How do you typically answer that with brands?
There's two things. Number one is I agree. We shouldn't take into consideration returning customer revenue if you have a high returning customer rate, if you have a consumable product. And so let's factor that out and look at CAC instead. So CAC just takes into consideration new customers divided by ad spend. And that's normally if you have a high return customer rate, that's normally the better metric to look at anyway, because you're going to want a KPI against LTV to CAC rather than just MER in isolation. Or you can look at AMER, which is acquisition MER. So you look at new customer revenue divided by ad spend. It depends which way you want to chop it. So that's the first thing, is valid. Don't take into consideration returning customer revenue. But when it comes to, okay, it considers SEO, it considers all of these other things. What you're trying to do if you're trying to hone down on attribution pathways is you're trying to discover a customer journey through a company journey. And so you're trying to figure out how is this customer experiencing the brand and then pathwaying through to a purchase by trying to triangulate based on a bunch of different companies who are trying to claim the conversion. And at the end of the day, every company is going to try claim the conversion. So you're never going to really get an accurate pathway. And attribution is just going to get worse and worse as all of these privacy settings roll out. Val actually said this to me, who I work closely with, and he's and he said that what is the delta in improving your business when attribution is currently 80% accurate and you want to move it to 85, when instead you could go and focus that attention and effort on the actual bottleneck in your business, which is currently at probably 0% and you need it at 100. Okay, do you know what your actual gross margin is at a product level and your profitability at a product level? No, that's probably where the focus should be, not on improving attribution by 5%. And it's a hard pill to swallow because I do understand as an e-com operator that to grow your business, you need to be allocating capital as efficiently as possible. And to have a good understanding as to where to allocate that capital makes a lot of sense, right? You've got your SEO agency going, hey, we're doing a great job, we're driving all your revenue. And then you get your paid agency going, it's us. And then you got your email in-house person going, no, it's me as well. And you're like, oh, I don't know where I just made 10 grand in profit this month. Where do I put it to continue growing? So it's an absolutely valid question, but the answer is not one that you'll probably like, which is you just got to look at the overall picture, because all of these people are trying to take 100% credit and attribution, and you trying to really figure out that pathway. It's not going to be an enormous needle mover in your business. It's going to very slightly move the needle. And look, if one day you get to 50 to 100 million top line, then you can look into MMM or something like that. But for now, it's not worth it.
I completely agree. I think a lot of people are too overly fixated on trying to solve the attribution issues within their business, as opposed to taking the time to really delve in and actually understand the underlying financial unit economics of the business is even running on. I completely agree. I think it kind of goes back to the same point, though, that, a lot of agencies and brand owners, like in-house marketers, are probably this is the world that they've come from so long. It has been ROAS as the dominant KPI or predominant kind of gauge of success, and it is a as you venture out and start to look at MER and CAC and these kind of harder, ungamifiable metrics, it's a pivotal shift in kind of even how you operate your business or how you do your job on a daily basis, because you're going from one way of working to a completely new one. And it can be a bit scary if you have just been working in one siloed way of kind of operating for the last probably 5-6 years to a new way. And it is a new way of looking at things, but I think therein lies the opportunity for people to really grasp it, because I think when you can kind of articulate this to a brand and you can start speaking these hard truths to a brand, sometimes they mightn't like it, but they'll appreciate it. But other brands, you can really start helping them understand that. I actually think a lot of brands fall into two spaces. Often they're over indexing, they're spending way too much on ads, and they shouldn't be. But on the other side of it, a lot of brands are massively under investing, and they're under investing because they don't have the wherewithal to really understand the opportunity that is in front of them. Like, it is terrifying for an SME to, for you to come to them and say, I think you should increase ad spend by 50%. That's terrifying if you're not fully dialed in on what the implications could be. But if that's laid out clearly for you, and you actually understand, I have to do this, this, and this, and that I can still get my kind of desired financial outcome, it's possible. But I think that piece, that kind of knitting together of the e-com marketing and finances of a lot of businesses still just isn't happening. So I still think there's a huge opportunity there. Okay, perfect. What are some of the biggest trends or opportunities that you're seeing brands kind of, your BlueSense brands, I suppose, kind of capitalize on in 2024?
Biggest opportunities, broadly
Trends or
speaking?
opportunities, yeah.
I would.
Quite a wide question, so.
It's a very wide question. Everything that we've talked about, right, which is just realigning towards better finances and knowing your numbers. I think one interesting thing off the back of what you were just saying, and it ties back into this new way of approaching media buying, is when you orientate towards MER. Well, let me take a step back. If you're not orientating towards MER and you're looking at in-platform ROAS, this is what's happening to you at the moment, which is that all of the platforms attribute based off 7-day click windows or 1-day view windows. And what that ends up meaning is that everyone, if they're focused on in-platform, is trying to convert users that have 7-day buying cycles. And most people don't. Most people take 20 to 25 to 30 days to buy from a brand, and no one's targeting top of funnel anymore. Because if you target top of funnel, you can't track it. Go and run a YouTube ad, you'll track nothing because the buying cycle's so long. And then people end up in bottom of funnel, and then it pathways through into actual conversions. And so there's actually a huge opportunity in the space at the moment with the fact that no one targets top of funnel traffic. No one targets brand. No one's targeting new people because everyone's going towards the shortest buying cycle windows possible. And that's what the Facebook pixel and campaigns are optimizing towards as well. Because Facebook can only claim a conversion within a 7-day click window, what do? They only target people that will convert within a 7-day click window. And so you significantly restrict down the actual people that you can market towards on Facebook and on Google. And if you take a step back and go, okay, let's take a risk here, but let's actually look at top line revenue rather than our in-platform numbers. And let's start doing some cold targeting, some actual cold targeting on people that have long consumer buying cycles. What you'll end up finding is pockets of opportunity where you'll suddenly see an improvement in MER because you're going after people that no one else is going after. And so that's an interesting way of thinking through media buying at the moment and the way that the platforms are optimizing and targeting particular users.
That one sounds like a full 2-hour podcast in itself. So
I think so.
I do completely agree, though. I think it's a massive missed opportunity for a lot of brands, and definitely. Nathan, I suppose just to come before we finish up, obviously you're based in Australia. During my time working at Shopify, I suppose I would have seen the length and breadth and the size of the e-com landscape in Australia, and it's often much bigger than I think we appreciate up here. Be interesting just to kind of hear a little bit of info on the Oz landscape down there, just for some of our listeners based up here in Europe and the States.
Yeah, it's bigger than you would think. That's for sure. There's a lot of agencies here in Australia, and some of the agencies are surprisingly big. Particularly the funny thing, going back to the start of the podcast, was that when we started BlueSense, we didn't even know what an agency was, which is pretty funny. We just thought, I like doing Google and Facebook ads. Can we do this for other people? And it was only about a month in that we started discovering, oh, other people do this too. And, oh, there's big players in the space. And, oh, actually, there's thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of brands in Australia that we could be partnering with and working for. And we had definitely this incorrect misconception at the start, which was, is there even that many brands in Australia? Should we just go straight to US? Because, by the way, my whole ecom journey was always US. I was always selling to the US. I was always importing products there because I had this flawed misconception that Australia's tiny, right? The US is 20x the size of Australia. Why would I sell to Australia? And so I had flawed thinking as well from the start. And now that I've directly worked on over 250 Australian ecom brands by this stage. And it's a big space. So I definitely wouldn't write it off.
What are some of the biggest Shopify stores operating in Australia at the moment?
A big one, like there's a few big brands that did incredibly well out of Australia, and then they go to the US and they become enormous. Like one of them being High Smile. That's one of the big names out of Australia. There's a couple others. But locally in Australia, you can do incredibly large numbers. I know brands that are, I don't know if I can mention their actual name, but I know brands that are doing 40 to 50 million in Australia, which obviously go to the US and you can compound that 5-6x and you suddenly become an incredibly large player. And you're playing in a space which you can build economies of scale in before going international, which is also like an incredible advantage. Is why I try to tackle multiple geos. When you can tackle your own geo, become incredibly good at it, build economies of scale within your manufacturing process or with your suppliers, with really everything. Like every single variable cost has economies of scale within it, within a D2C brand. And so you can leverage all of them before going and being really competitive in a new market.
Interesting, really interesting. I think Udi and is it White Fox, I think, are two other big ones down there as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of marketplaces, Amazon isn't really much of a thing in Australia, if I'm not mistaken.
Not really. No, I use it every day, but I don't think the average consumer does.
And is there any other kind of dominant marketplaces that you guys, from a D2C landscape, will be more native to Australia, or is it just more strictly D2C everywhere?
There's a few. There's eBay, there's Catch.com. I don't think Catch.com is global. I think it's just Australia. No. Yeah.
I've never heard of it anyway.
So they're a pretty big player in the marketplace space, but that would be it. It's predominantly D2C, which is
nice.
Which is different to the US, right? Because the US is heavily dominated by marketplaces.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, Nathan, before we wrap up, I suppose, where can people find you if they're looking to get in contact?
I'll give you my YouTube link, so you can put that below. Blue Sense Digital, we post every day on performance marketing. We've also got a podcast called the Blues Brothers Podcast. And then you can find me on LinkedIn too, which is Nathan Perdriau. You're probably not going to be able to spell it, so I'll make sure that Thomas puts the link below as well.
Sorry, I probably butchered your second name pronunciation of the intro as well. But
that's all right, everyone does it.
Just actually, before we jump, Nathan, I suppose you've started posting quite a lot on LinkedIn in the last couple of months, and obviously you guys have gone quite content heavy with the podcast as well. How have you found that, or what was the driver for that, and how has it kind of worked out for you? Obviously, I learned a lot from a lot of the posts that you guys put up, and I can see you got quite a good engagement on it. So eager to just kind of hear how that's gone for you so far.
Yeah, we started the content because I was making so much content internally for the team, building out 5 to 6 training videos a week for the team, and I went, a lot of this is a bit better than some of the stuff I'm consuming on YouTube. We should probably put this out public facing. And so then I started to repurpose YouTube or internal trainings into LinkedIn posts. So funny enough, majority of the LinkedIn posts you see, they're actually just internal training videos that have been repurposed into a short, condensed LinkedIn formatted post.
Nice.
And it's going well. You get an insane reach off of LinkedIn in particular, but all platforms. Obviously, we've started the podcast, we've started the YouTube channel, which is starting to get good traction. The thing that I really, really like about the YouTube channel is that we now rank organically for all kinds of searches for what people are trying to figure out. Like we have the #1 ranking video for Shopify cohort analysis tutorials. And so
Wow.
anyone that's going and searching for a Shopify cohort analysis, I think just in Australia, maybe global, I don't know, we're number one. And so we're getting just views and subscribers every single day through a piece of content that, funny enough, existed for a year and a half in our training program. And then I just went, oh, let's just take it and put it public facing. And now it's there as a good evergreen piece of content that's just building awareness.
Wow, interesting. Very, very interesting. Must go on and take another look at the YouTube channel after this. But listen, Nathan, really, really enjoyed the chat. And yeah, we're looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks, Thomas.
Cheers.